debate. You'll get the real story from inside the locker room, and you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go! Go!
And good morning, Birds Insiders. Appreciate you're up and at it as early as we are here on Birds 365. You got your Mac and Mac guys, Jody McDonald, with my partner, John McMullen, ready to talk Eagles football with you for the next couple hours. J-Mac, we kind of speculated yesterday the all-important cut from 90 down to 85 that may just shape the fates and fortunes of the Eagles season. All right, maybe not. We're just kidding here. But they did cut 3 more guys. No great surprises. When you heard the name, what was the first thing you thought?
First thing I thought was everybody was waived injured. So that led me to believe the decision was, okay, if you can't help us get through the preseason game on Sunday, we're going to move on from you early. They just want bodies for that preseason game after the starters get their work in practice and the joint practices with Cleveland. So, I don't necessarily think it was, okay, who was the worst players as much as who was the healthiest at the back end of the roster. And we're going to keep the healthiest.
Agree on all fronts. And much like the player that the Eagles had previously cut, when you're released with an injury designation, if no one claimed you, then you can bring them back onto your roster on the injured list. So you can expand past the normal numbers, which is playing kind of a roster loophole game, which is within the rules, so more power to them. If that's the case, are there any guys that of the 3 Lenore, Maiden, and who am I missing?
Jimmy Moreland.
Do you think any of the 3 will be those type of players where the Eagles will keep around, or do you think there'll be a settlement and those guys will eventually be given their outright release?
No, settlement for each. In fact, yesterday, Carrick Wheatball, who was waived injured a couple of days before to make room for DeAndre Torrey. You remember when the Eagles brought in the running back, he was actually released off IR after he cleared waivers with an injury settlement. So these 3 guys are more in the Carrick Wheatball category than the Noah Ellis category, who was the guy who, was on the non-football injury list, and the Eagles got him through waivers, and they seem to be keeping him. It's still early in the process. I mean, they could still be working on a settlement, but typically in these types of situations, remember, for the Eagles, if they wanted any of these players, they're done. They're done for the year. When you're placed on injured reserve in the preseason, that's it. You're done. So it's not like they can come back at some point, where if you make the 53 and then you put somebody on injured reserve, then you have all those liberalized rules where guys can come back after 4 games, and it's a lot easier than it used to be. These guys would be completely out for the year. So this will be injury settlements abounding for these particular guys. And, maybe you pay them for a couple more weeks and that type of thing.
2 things on that front. Number one, for any Eagle fans who are out there wondering, how does this affect their salary cap situation? Doesn't, because of the top 51 rule. None of these players are in the top 51. So it's just a couple extra bucks out of Jeff Lurie's pocket. And in case you didn't know, Jeff Lurie and all Philadelphia Eagle owners, all 31 of the other owners of the NFL teams, doing okay. No one's going to have to start a GoFundMe page.
Well, they might still want to start it, but yeah, they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Rich people like money, but that's another conversation.
Don't really need to give Jeff a helping hand there. He'll be all right to write those checks. This is a roster question I should know, but I don't, so I turn to my expert. Is there a max number of guys that you can actually have on the IR before the season starts? Or can you just happen to load up on them, luck of the draw, whatever, you get them through and you do like the player and you want to just have them around for next year, even though we know, as you just explained, they're done for this season. Is there a max number you can put on that list?
No. It's, if you have a bunch of injuries, you can put as many players as you want. But you do have to, there are rules as far as player stashing, which used to be a bigger thing in a different generation. George Allen, for those who go way back, was famous for it with the Washington at the time, a name we cannot say anymore. We can, but you get the point. He was famous for that, stashing guys. You do have to have sort of medical the backing. You got to prove if somebody's on. You can't say, "Oh, Grant Calcaterra has a strained hamstring. We want to put him on injured reserve and stash him for the whole year." You can't get away with that kind of stuff anymore. It's got to be a legitimate season-ending injury. So there is no limit, but it's got to be legitimate.
And you get the doctors who, but then again, I think you're being kind to the NFL. If you don't think it goes on in part, you're kidding yourself. There are still some guys who, wink, wink, nod, nod, get through that process and end up spending an entire year, even if they could come back at some point. They agreed to.
Where it really shows up later in the season. If you got somebody on the bottom end of your roster and he has, a sprained ankle or something, and you got 6 weeks left, it's obviously not going to be a 6-week. You can get away with stuff like that. But, and Calcaterra is probably a great example because, it's a hamstring. He's already been out for, a long time, it seems. That would be a tough sell. So there is a lot of gray area, no doubt about that.
But the Eagles cut down their 3 guys yesterday, so they are at 85. They're taking all 85. Or is anybody staying home? I shouldn't say that. There might be guys who are injured.
The injury list. I mean, it's pretty deep, but no, I don't think. I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't know. Are they going to take Jason Kelce? Maybe I should have asked that. I don't know. If he wants to go, if he wants to stay home, they'll probably keep him at home. It's probably up to him.
Didn't Nick say the other day that he likes the joint practices on the road because they travel as a team, stay in a hotel, that whole bonding thing he was trying to sell the other day.
Yeah.
Does Jason Kelce really need that?
No. Well, there are certain players above, and he's one of those players. They'll leave it up to him, I would imagine. The other guys, all the injuries, they're all out there watching practice for the most part. Although I haven't seen Javon Hargrave out there. He's got a toe injury. I might have missed him. So there's a couple guys, but I mean, yeah, Kelce would be. I would think they would leave it up to Jason. Do you want to come? Do you not want to come? And knowing Jason will probably want to go. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. But I mean, most James Bradbury left practice yesterday, which was a little concerning. But then, he came out of the injury tent and he watched the rest of practice. He didn't go back in. But if it were serious, they wouldn't let him watch the rest of the practice. So not concerned about that at all. They're pretty healthy, just for the, guys who are dealing with some soft tissue injuries that they're being cautious about. The good news is they haven't had serious injuries, and they'll trump that up as, hey, we game the system, Jody. Yeah. We game the system.
So far, so good. We'll see if it lasts. We still have 2 more preseason games and 4 joint practices to go. And oh my God, the other team will actually be trying to hit you, Coach Sirianni. If injuries abound, well, I guess that would also kind of make his point that, if you're going to play real football, you could really get hurt.
Yeah.
Speaking of getting hurt, one that I thought was pretty significant coming out of camp last couple of days is Miles Sanders. Hurt again. How many times have we said it about the Eagles' most talented running back? His biggest ability is his availability, and it's not always there. Something always seems to crop up that takes Miles out of the mix. Where he sits right now, where we sit 20 some odd days before the first regular season game in Detroit against the Lions. Give me Miles' overall status as a guy who, always seems to get hurt. And the Eagles at the running back position, not a position of great depth here. When I say depth, I mean just at 85 guys. You can have guys that are in camp, going to be able to play. Huntley as many carries as he got in the first preseason game. Are the Eagles right now staffed well enough at the running back position in your eyes?
I don't think they are. And that's one of the positions where I think you might see something via whether it's trade or waiver wire when things get cut to 53. I find it very hard to believe they're only going to keep 3. Just from, as you mentioned, Miles has a history. You got to be aware of it.
Yep.
And he's already got a hamstring, and you're going to try to get through 17 games with 3 backs. And oh, by the way, Kenny Gainwell has not been impressive in this camp at all. So for those assuming he's going to push Miles Sanders, ain't happening. I'm interested to see if they keep going down the road of he's the hurry up back, he's the third down back at all times, because Miles caught the football in the opener. Now, granted, it doesn't mean anything, but he caught it, and that's an improvement. And he's just a more dynamic player when he's out there. So I'm interested to see how that shakes out. And Boston Scott's back from the concussion. I'm not as concerned with that. Still limited as he goes through the protocol, but he'll be fine. And he's a good player, and he's somebody you can count on as a backup. But yeah, I mean, I'm not even concerned from a goal line standpoint, other than, if it pops up like it did last year and you have to play Gardner Minshew a game or two, then you need a goal line back. You need a short yardage back. What if Jalen Hurts isn't there? When he's there,
Yeah.
I'm not concerned with it. But when he's not there, that's a big issue for this team. So they could use a Jordan Howard type player. I don't think they want Jordan Howard. I think that's evident. But there's plenty of 225-pound backs out there, and they should be able to find one that's better than what they have.
It's funny. You beat me to the point with Jordan Howard. He's had workouts with several different teams this offseason. I know the Raiders were one of them. I think Pittsburgh. I think he came in and worked out with Pittsburgh. Didn't sign with either one, so he's still sitting out there. You say that, well, it's pretty evident that the Eagles don't want Jordan Howard. Didn't we say the same thing last year? And then all of a sudden they reached out to Jordan Howard. They signed him. He's on the roster. He's carrying the football, and he's making plays for the Eagles. So I'm not going down the road yet of Jordan Howard is out of the mix.
Well, they signed him. I'm going to try to look it up real quick here. Last year, they signed him. I can't find it. I'll have to work in the break. But they signed him late, but they signed him in the off season. I mean, they didn't sign him in training camp. They didn't sign him in season. He was part of this team throughout
from day one of camp. I thought it was a camp signing.
No, he was here from day one of camp. He was here the entire time, and he was on the practice squad. That's what happened, because they changed the rules of the practice squad,
right? No,
where
I knew that.
you could have bets on the practice squad, and then he got elevated when they needed him after Miles Sanders got hurt. But he was here the entire time. Maybe
it was after spring practice.
You're thinking of it was after spring, but You're probably thinking of when he left for Miami and then they brought him back. If it was terrible in Miami the year before.
I'm thinking of last year, and you'll find the exact date. But yeah, I thought they'd already arrived at camp when they decided to reach out and re-sign him. But if you tell me it was before that, I'll believe you. But see if you can find out that exact date. So we are further along than they were last year. But they're also, I think, a little shorter at the running back position this year than they were last year.
Well, they definitely are, because they don't have that big back presence, and they need it, to be honest. And Kennedy Brooks is. I don't think Jason Huntley did much to help his cause against the Jets. I don't know if other people saw it in a different way. Maybe his ability as a kickoff returner helps a little bit. I'm trying to look it up as I'm talking. April 7th is when the Eagles signed Jordan Howard. And same day as they signed Eric Wilson, April 7th.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So pretty early in the process, actually. They re-signed him to a 1-year deal. So he was here for spring work and training camp, and then he got put on the practice squad. So it is a lot different this year.
Yeah, I knew he got elevated from the practice squad, but I actually thought it was like a July signing. You're telling me it was April. And yes, Boston Scott has become the forgotten guy, but that was the same position he was in last year. Because, yeah, I remember in camp, people going, well, Howard's going to be ahead of Boston Scott. And then Boston Scott had as good as productive a season, even more so down by the goal line. And for Boston Scott, you can basically put him in mothballs until the end of the season, because, he's got to play the 2 games against the Giants. That's all he does is score touchdowns against the Giants, but they don't play the Giants till week 14 or week 18. So, Boston, please don't get hurt between now and then.
It's a nice luxury to have Boston Scott, because, he is, I compare him to a utility player in baseball, and everybody's like, well, utility players, and maybe not in the new era, but in our era, Jody, in baseball, there was sort of, that was an ability. Certain guys you can't play certain guys once a week. They lose, they can't come off the bench, and they can't do it. And it's just, they might have more talent, but they can't deal with not playing all the time and get into a rhythm. There's something to say that's a legitimate trait, and Boston Scott has proven to be good at it, in the fact that, they can just break the glass, and here comes Boston. Usually it's against the Giants, but I'm not as concerned about. I'm more concerned about Kenny Gainwell, because I do not think he's had a good camp, and I think a lot of people just penciled him in and said he's a good player and he's going to be this and he's going to be that. Maybe it's the case, but I could see the Eagles getting a little bit worried because he hasn't been what they thought he was going to be in that jump from year 1 to year 2.
He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. That makes this the Mac and Mac Birds 365 show on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Do us a favor. If you're watching right now, you've streamed on in, hit the like button. Give your boys a little helping hand here. We appreciate when you do that. Helps out with our algorithm, whatever that means. We will, via the algorithm, figure out how to get the most out of our next guest. He's going to be a regular contributor. Johnny Mac will be doing spots down on his show, down the Jersey Shore, and we're going to get Mike Gill to hop in with us once a week. It is time for a Mike Gill appearance. He joins us next here on Birds 365.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
The big story on Action.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
7 on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit. Glasses for cocktails, right?
It's for this, this, and that.
Is the length of the glass equal to your...
You betcha.
But is it made out of...
Glass?
Yeah, okay, but is the rip...
Smooth?
Will you stop doing...
That?
I'm the professional here.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. All from the company that's highly awarded. 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and deliciously tasting vodka. So good, it just disappears.
A Wednesday edition of Birds 365 with Mac and McMullen and McDonald. We are joined by our beach bud from down the shore, the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Mike Gill jumps in with us here on Birds 365. Looks like he got the tan working just fine, or it could be his lighting. I'm not sure which one. How are you, Mr. Gill?
Mac and Mac, I'm doing good. It's another beautiful day down the shore. It's one of those days where it feels like football is close.
Yeah, how about we are getting close, but even closer for you to Labor Day, Mike, when you get a little breather and maybe you can enjoy that nice weather down the shore.
This whole week has felt like a little fall. It's been a little extra chill in the air, especially at night. So we're getting ready.
Hoodie season.
Right? The silly season.
Yeah.
I don't know how silly it is, but we probably pay too close attention to it and dissect it and take it down to its studs every single play that's made, practice, preseason game. Well, yeah, preseason should be a little bit more important. We haven't had you on since Jalen Hurts went 6 for 6 on his, John likes to remind us, the perfect quarterback ranking that he put up.
Perfect, baby.
He's going to be able to do that all year, right, Mike? It doesn't matter, regular season, preseason, and joint practices. He's going to complete every pass against another team's opponent all year, correct?
I asked John on my show Monday, what was more impressive, Hurts on Friday or Sam Bradford against Green Bay going 10 for 10 when he was going to be like the MVP of the league? I mean, I think we all know that these games are, I don't know. Hurts probably won't take another snap between now and the first.
I hope so. I want the perfect preseason, Mike. If they sit him, he'll always have that perfect preseason. I'll be bringing up that for years.
Wasn't Bradford the same? Did he play again in the preseason after that, or was that all we saw of him and everybody was all excited? I mean, these preseason games, especially, you think they only play 3 now, and then there's a week off before the season starts. So you're not playing another game in a real snap for almost a month. That the last time we would have seen him in a game other than these joint practices. So that 6 for 6 night is all you're going to get. So sure, there's probably going to be some extra anticipation when he takes that snap against Detroit in week 1.
Yeah, I think things will get a little bit of clarity with the joint practices. Just for the real, they're practicing against 2, maybe not. People don't look at them as significant contenders, but 2 pretty talented rosters over the next 2 weeks. You get to see Myles Garrett, you get to see Nick Chubb. you get who knows what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson coming down. But that offensive line, even though they've lost 2 centers, everybody else is really good. JOK at linebacker is a heck of a player. Denzel Ward is back. You just get a nice little temperature taking for the Eagles against a different color, so to speak.
Yeah, and these joint practices have kind of become the thing, which is interesting because you can get hurt in a joint practice, I guess, as much as you could in a preseason game. But I guess the whole theory is we can run a 3rd and 7 play 10 times in a row if we want to and see who our receiver is, who's going to get that big 3rd and 7 play for us, as opposed to a preseason game where in 1 or 2 series – a down and distance that we don't like or that we want to see may never come up. So I guess this is why these practices have kind of replaced these preseason games. But, the hope is, as you mentioned, this Cleveland defense is pretty good, that the Eagles offense will get a shot to go up against a defense that does have some talent on it. I guess I don't know, is Watson going to practice in these things?
They're having settlement talks. That's the NFLPA and the NFL. So that's evidently heating up. It'll be interesting. I assume even if they settle, he'll be able to practice. But I don't know how Cleveland will want to handle it because they have to get Jacoby Brissett ready for the regular season, and he probably needs some work. So it is going to be interesting to see how they handle it.
Yeah, because that would be the one spot where they're a little in flux, I guess. I mean, because they've got, you mentioned the running backs, their offensive line's pretty good. They've got a couple of weapons. The only unsettling spot for this Cleveland team is really they're very much like the Eagles. The most important spot is probably the most unsettling spot.
And at least the Eagles have the decision in their own hands. The Browns don't even have that yet. One guy I did want to ask about on the Birds, and I was thinking about him yesterday, not only because of what he's done in practice all off season leading up to this game and the practices up against the Browns, but the fact that every time I turned on ESPN yesterday, they were in fantasy mode. That it was fantasy special. All right, they're doing a fantasy special. I'll come back later.
Marathon.
And it says still on, and it's still on, and it's still on. I'm ready to shoot my TV. And every time they went to a tight end evaluation and listing, whatever, Dallas Goedert doesn't crack the top 5, which I don't quite understand, and I sure as hell don't agree with the way he's been used here in the preseason and the fact that he and Jalen seem to be on the same page. He could be a top 3 tight end in the NFL this year. Agree or disagree, Mike Gill?
Oh, I'm a big fan of Goedert this year, Jody. I would agree. In fact, I had it on over my shoulder at one point yesterday, and I saw somebody labeling him as a bust this year. In other words, don't draft him. You're going to be disappointed. I think, when Ertz got traded last year, whatever week that was, right around midseason, 8, 9, somewhere around there, I remember saying, don't be surprised if Goedert finishes with 1,000 yards this year. And he got damn near close. I think he kind of slowed down towards the end. But if you look at his yards per game, I mean, he had an unbelievable season considering he was sharing targets in the first half of the year. I think with A.J. Brown, we got a good glimpse of a lot of attention rolling with Brown and that opening up the guy that Hurts probably trusts the most. I mean, he does have a couple drop issues, but I think you'll see a guy that's open just constantly. I agree with you, Jody. I think that Goedert has a huge role in this offense, and the numbers will be popping off the page where you're going to be talking about top 5 statistical season for him. And not to mention, he's on the field a lot because he blocks too.
Right. Yeah.
So they can get him, more snaps. He's not one of those guys that you have to find sub packages to try to find ways to give him the ball.
Now, I'll ask you both this because my first assessment, look, full disclosure, there is nothing I care less about in life than fantasy football. So when somebody says Dallas Goedert's going to be a bust in a fantasy realm, is that more on Dallas Goedert or the quarterback? In other words, if you're a receiver, you need a vehicle to get you the football.
Right.
And there are certain guys, I always use Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins as the example. They're good quarterbacks, but they're not great quarterbacks, but they're going to put up great numbers. So they're good fantasy people, not only for what they do throwing the football, but who they're going to throw the football to, because they're going to get a ton of yardage and a ton of traffic. So when they say that, are they really saying Jalen Hurts isn't good enough to get Dallas Goedert the ball?
Well, interestingly enough, that same marathon has Jalen Hurts ranked as the 6th best fantasy quarterback.
Well,
so
right.
quick,
you know how
that's
that
the running
works. It's
aspect.
because he's going to pull the ball down and run with it and score touchdowns with his legs.
Exactly. So it kind of just shows that those rankings are based more on statistical output and what kind of offense you're in. If Hurts, look, for me, I think that Goddard is, when they drafted him in the 2nd round, you know, you're kind of thinking, well, you have Zach Ertz here. Well, this is a guy that we thought was so talented that we had to have him here. And for a couple of years, they're trying to figure out ways to kind of incorporate him. And while he wasn't a full-time player, you're always kind of like, man, this guy makes plays. Could he actually be better than the best all-time tight end that you've ever had? And it's hard to come to terms with sometimes that the next guy is better than the guy you're watching, who helped you win a Super Bowl, was a 2nd-round pick himself, and was a justifiable 2nd-round pick. That was a Chip Kelly pick, I think, by the way. So when you're replacing the guy who's your best, it's hard to imagine that he's better. But Goddard might actually be better than Ertz. I mean, he might have more physical tools, size, speed, blocking ability than Ertz does.
He's definitely more well-rounded.
Not to mention, I don't know that Zach Ertz was going to pinball off that tackle and get into the end zone. No. He was not known for his yards after the catch, if you will.
Right. And you got the right read on it, Mike. If you're just talking about all-around ability, Goedert's going to go by Ertz. Ertz was the better pass catching. Put up the numbers he did. No Eagle tight end prior to.
Better hand, definitely.
Has done anything, but I would not be surprised if Goedert gets into Ertz-like receiving numbers this year. I'm predicting a big season for Ertz throwing the football. The Eagles are going to throw the football if we evidence nothing else in game number 1. First drive, 0-1 attempts. I think they were kind of making a statement that, yes, the Eagles are here to throw the football this year, which means Goedert's going to get a lot of balls thrown his way. I think he can do what Ertz can do. I think he can be as good a pass catcher, damn close to it, and you add in the ability to block into the mix. That's what makes him a better all-around tight end than Ertz.
And they don't really have another guy. John and I talked about this yesterday. They don't really have a second guy at this moment right now. I think that's very up in the air. So you would imagine when John posts the snap counts on a Monday, you're going to see Goedert probably playing, 89% of the snaps on offense, because they just don't really have a bona fide second option at this point. So that makes it even more
might be low, Mike, if he's healthy. That might be low.
And on those 11% that he's not on the field, some of them are going to be 4 wide receiver sets where he's not going to be replaced by a tight end. He's going to be replaced by a 4th wide receiver.
Right. That's where your Zach Pascal gets snaps. And depending on who gets, John, you've explained, I'm sure, to the people on Birds 365 here, it's depending on the situation. Do they need a big play? You go with Watkins. Do they need more down and distance? You probably go with Zach Pascal. I think we're seeing that he's a very he's been kind of described as like a Jason Avant type of receiver, where he just knows where the sticks are. He's not a fast guy, but he can find ways to get open, sure-handed, and he turns into one of those guys that the quarterback just trusts in. I always say 3rd and 7 is that who's catching the ball on 3rd down and 7? Do you know where the sticks are? And that's a valuable player in this league, to just find a little, that I feel like the Eagles have never had that guy who just kind of finds the seam and just sits there, just like finds the open, sits and gets the ball there, and then revert. Aguilar did it in the Super Bowl year. He was excellent in the slot that year. But other than that, they really have not had that guy who can turn, catch, and then get back up the field.
Yeah, but even during the Super Bowl year, Nelson wasn't as reliable. Like, if you think of the great slot receivers, you want reliability. And the Eagles have kind of gone that route. You mentioned a couple names, Jason Avant, Jordan Matthews, the bigger type receivers than the shiftier, Patriots are famous for Welkers, Edelmans, that type of receiver.
Amendola, right?
Yeah. I think, that's what people were hoping for a little bit with Britton Covey, but it's way too early for, to speculate about that. But I do think you bring up a good point about reliability in that 3rd and 7. If they're going to double team A.J. Brown, they're going to double team Dallas Goedert because that's where the Eagles want to go. Who would you rather throw the football to, Zach Pascal or Quez Watkins on a 3rd and 7? I'm going Zach Pascal. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I know he's catching the football.
Right.
And
it's like Jason Avant wasn't the most, a flamboyant guy, but he was very dependable. He caught that ball for you and made the sticks move. A lot of the times it's, can you keep drives going? And you need that sure-handed guy when you're on the other side of the 50 to keep that first downs moving and kind of get the ball up the field. I think like 2 years ago when they were just awful, they were always playing with horrible down and distances, and they didn't have the guy who could just simply sit in there, catch the ball. And people always talk about the offense doesn't look good. Well, when you're on first down and you're incomplete pass and now you're 2nd and 10 and you're always playing at bad down and distance, that's a tough way to go. But when you have those guys, that's because Wentz was just so bad at delivering the ball, but he also didn't get a lot of help that year. You had drops constantly. You had guys who just could not get open. This way, hey, 1st and 10, a little 3-yarder. Okay, now it's 2nd and 7. All right, you got guys who can catch the ball, find those little spots on the field, which should be available because of the guys. There's more talent on the field now, which gives the lesser guys space to just catch the ball, which sounds elementary, but they couldn't do it a couple of years ago.
Mike, need your take on a guy Johnny and I discussed segment 1 of the show, and that is Miles Sanders. We all know Miles' situation, contract year, very motivated. Eagles are going to use him the way they're going to use him. Opening game, threw it to him twice, even though they didn't hand it to him at all. They threw it to him twice in the first possession of the game, and he made both catches. But lo and behold, here he pops up with an injury again yesterday. So his status in these joint practices is very much up in the air. The Eagles seem to lean pretty heavily on this. They're not deep in the running back position as of right now. Can you put eggs in Miles Sanders' basket and only keep, John suggested 3. There's an outside possibility they could just keep 3. I don't think there's any chance of that. They're going to keep 4. Is 4 even enough if Miles Sanders is going to be an injury question guy all year long?
Well, I think we definitely have seen that he's an injury question, especially if you're entering with hamstring issues. That's when I start to worry. How do you shake, those soft tissue type of injuries? He's an interesting one because 2 years ago, he showed the ability to have the big breakout runs. He had all these 50-plus yard runs, and he showed that explosion. Last year, we didn't see those runs at all. And then you go back to his rookie year, where he caught almost 50 passes. Where did that guy go? So can they somehow morph the guy who caught 50 balls with the guy who had the big breakaway runs and get that guy? I don't really see them using him in that way. And I think a little bit of this injury has them concerned too. Do they keep 3? They probably do keep 3, but they know it's like the tight end. They have Richard Rodgers on speed dial. Hey, we can get Jordan Howard and kind of stash him on the practice squad because no one else is going to take him. So I think they'll probably go with 3 on the roster, but a couple guys they have, a familiarity with kind of hanging around on the practice squad. And we know in this day and age, you could find a running back just hanging around in somebody's practice.
Yeah, you would think the Eagles can't find one, though. I do, one of the concerns, I think, and he dropped another pass yesterday in practice. Kenny Gainwell has not taken that step forward that I think a lot of people were expecting. And it's just camp, and maybe he turns into a game player and not a practice player. But, boy, they need Miles Sanders more than ever before. Boston Scott, we talked about, reliable guy. But Jason Huntley, he's not it. And Kennedy Brooks, probably not ready. waiver wire to me is a spot where they could probably look around the league, top 53. You know, when they cut down to the initial 53, they can probably find somebody who's cut somewhere else and get an upgrade here. But with the Eagles about to head to Cleveland, Kareem Hunt, Howie's famous for the August trade. He already pulled one off with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Can he do it again? Would the Eagles have interest in bringing in a legitimate, decent back who you could argue is every bit as good as Miles Sanders?
Right. And they're going to be in Cleveland the next couple of days here. So there's a lot of good conversation there. And look, the Eagles have personnel that they can probably consider parting with. I mean, what does Cleveland need at this point? What would they actually say, hey, we're lacking in this area? Do the Eagles match up there?
Well, they need a center, but the Eagles can't give up a center right now. And by the way, the Browns should just sign J.C. Tretter. I mean, he's one of the best centers in football that might be getting blackballed because he's the Players Association president. But that's another discussion. They need help there. They need help at receiver. Can you convince them that Jalen Reagor is a decent reclamation project? That's going to be interesting. Jalen Reagor, most notably, very similar to JJ in that I think both need a change of scenery. JJ got it. We'll see if he can do anything with it. Jalen needs it, but the Eagles aren't going to give him away.
No.
Can you convince somebody else that Jalen Reagor has some value?
Was Andrew Berry already gone by the time the Eagles picked Jalen Reagor? I'm getting time. We know Catherine Raish was here, right?
Yeah, Catherine was here.
And she's in a power position with the Browns now, correct?
Yeah. Barry was long gone, but Catherine was here. So I think, and the moral of the story is Cleveland knows Philadelphia's roster pretty good, and their front office people know the Eagles' front office people pretty good, which certainly you put that all wrapped into the fact that you're practicing 2 days together. You're sitting in the stadium together probably on Sunday afternoon, and you've got plenty of time for conversation to mix and match possibility. Hey, Hunt doesn't want to be here. We've got guys that you know can play, that you like, that are just maybe need a change of scenery. Maybe your coaching staff get your hands on them. So I wouldn't be shocked if something to that effect happened at all.
I would be a little surprised if they were able to pull it off, just because I'm sorry, I've kind of given up on Jalen Reagor. I know for Eagles' sake and Eagles' hope, you have to hope someone else sees something that the Eagles haven't been able to get out of him. I just, sorry, don't think it's there, but that's just me. All right. Jonathan Gannon got to do some different things and punch some different buttons against the Jets this week against the Browns. Kind of a different offense, a little bit different level of player personnel. Is this going to be another learning week for Birds fans like ourselves to see what Jonathan Gannon's got planned, at least for his starting unit against Cleveland, either in the joint practices and or the game Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, and real quick, just going back to we saw the Darby for Jordan Matthews trade. What did they throw in there? Wasn't there a
third round pick?
Third round pick. So, you know, Matthews was a guy who had been somewhat productive, but Darby just didn't fit the Buffalo. What was it? Jim Schwartz and Rex Ryan there was a switch there, right? And he just didn't fit in the defense. So they were basically like, you know, we'll just take your guy. So something to that effect wouldn't surprise me. That's why, you know, on that. But the defensive line, you take a look at what they did the other night. I think you're just going to continue to, like, there's no starters as much as they're just going to be different down and distance groupings and odd fronts. And hey, we go back to 3rd and 7. So we want our Jordan Davis there so we can get pass rushers on the outside because he's going to take up 2 guys here. I'm really intrigued to see. I don't know that you'll see him a lot Sunday, or if at all, but how much playing time they're going to end up giving him. Like, do you get greedy throughout the season knowing, man, this guy just takes up so much attention, and that's going to open up our Hassan Reddicks and Josh Sweats and, you know, Brandon Graham, that kind of stuff. So I think you're just going to continue to see him mix and match as the different down and distances kind of or situations in the game.
Yeah, I think there's been a little bit of weird kind of thought that the Eagles have changed or are changing their defense. They're running the exact same thing they ran last year. Jordan Davis just, in theory, gives them a better opportunity to get in more, second and third and longs. But basically, it's the 5-2 overhang on rundowns, and it's the 4-man front on when they want to pass rush. And that's what it was last year, but a bunch of guys were playing out of position.
Well, you go back to
talent.
You go back to Fletcher Cox when he said, they pay me to rush the passer. And he had that whole kind of stare down with Jonathan Gannon between the media. And that was him basically saying he wants me to do something that I'm not good at, which is take up space, eat up blockers, and let other guys get sacks. Well, here's Fletcher Cox saying, no, I'm the guy that's supposed to get sacks. I'm not supposed to be here, grabbing 3 jerseys. So I think you're right, John. I think you're seeing the same. You're just seeing different personnel in those spots, which is now making it work.
Real quick to ship. Go ahead, Jody.
I was just going to ask if we're talking about the defensive line. Are we going to see more of Derek Barnett how many snaps did he get last week?
He was a deference player. He got 2 or 3 snaps. I don't know what to make of that. So Jody brought it up. There's certain the first team starting offense, they played, I think, 8 snaps.
8 plays.
And they were perfect. The defense, even less, because they quickly got off the field. But you had all the deference players, and most of them were obvious. You had new players like TJ Edwards and Marcus Epps who sort of broken through. But one guy in that category was Derek Barnett. And that part, I admit, I don't understand. Like, why do the Eagles still think Derek Barnett is part of this core as opposed to being the 4th rotational defensive end that's not going to play that much? I think Jody might have something. I think it might be time to start wondering what the heck's going on there.
Well, and that's where, you have these different base looks that are mostly odd so that you can get different pass rushers just rotating at optimal. What was Gabe Kapler's word that he wanted optimal freshness out there. So you get Derek Barnett for one series, just, hey, you're going after the pass, just bull head down, go after the passer. The next series, Jordan Davis, you're in the middle. We're going to get 2 guys next to you and then 2 guys on the outside. And those 2 guys on the outside, we're just going to tell them you have one role on this series. Give us it's like a relief pitcher. Come in and give us your best 15.
Yeah, guy throwing 98, for 15 pitches. Yeah.
Oh, Derek Barnett, there's a flag on the play. I'm sorry. You get him wound up a little bit too much. It's coming out of the referee's pocket.
Now, that said, outside of him being a bonehead, I mean, he has had some success as a pass rusher in terms of not sacks. You're right. Not sacks, but getting some pressure, because part of the problem is he's getting the pressure. He just doesn't know when to let up the pressure, and he gets that late hit or he goes off sides. I mean, if you can erase those penalties, which is a big if, is he a serviceable pass rusher?
John,
4th rotational.
Do I really have to give my answer on that one, or is it
well
known?
Speaking, let's go here. I think the most exciting part of these joint practices this week will be, speaking of pass rushers, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney against Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. That's as good as it gets right there.
Absolutely. And the fact, and this is a good spot too, to see, Jurgens get a shot. He's going to be with the first unit here to see how he holds up against this front as well. I loved what they did with Jurgens. I got to be honest. I wasn't a huge fan of taking a center. I wasn't knocking the player. It was just the round value. Center in round 2, I was kind of like, but if he steps in and can perform like he did on Friday night, you found yourself an opportunity to continue doing what you're doing with your current player, and that's hard to do. That's hard to do.
I put on the Roman Reigns acknowledge me gif. I said it on Mike Gill's show. I said it everywhere. The Eagles were taking Cam Jurgens at number 51. So I'm going to pat myself on the back.
Very good. For that one. And I got to give you more credit on Jurgens, because you were right last week. I thought that there was a possibility that when Kelsey went down and Jurgens stepped up and became the starter, that he might be treated. What was the word you used? Deference? That Barnett had the deference this past week with his 2-snap play. I thought Jurgens might get the same because he's a starter. We know he needs to work. We know he's only a rookie. We know he could use the snaps, but God forbid he go down with an injury. So the Eagles, being the protective organization that they are, I thought they were going to pull him out. They didn't. When they pulled out all the other offensive line starters, Jurgens stayed in there. Johnny Mack said that would be the case. I was wrong about that. I thought they'd go err on the side of caution. Same again this week, guys? Does he still get more snaps than Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata and who am I forgetting? Isaac on the offensive line? Does he play more than anybody else on the O-line again? Because
I guess the question is, what other centers do they have that they can get him out of the game that quickly? I mean, you figure you take Kelsey out. If he played 12 snaps, then Jurgens would get, the second group of snaps, and then you go to the next. What other center did they want to
great Cameron Tom is the backup center. And, he can play 4 quarters if you need him to. Jack Anderson can play center as well. So they have some other options, but I do think they need to get him ready just in case. I think that's what it's about. And he is still a rookie. It was impressive, but,
well, they play him a lot. If they play him a lot, does that suggest that, hey, we think Kelsey will be ready and we just want to give him some extra reps with this group so that, he's getting first team opportunities and getting the speed of the game against first teamers as opposed to third teamers?
Well, I definitely think the Eagles believe Jason Kelsey will be back for week 1 in Detroit, but you still have to plan for the contingency. So,
but getting him the most reps possible in the case that Kelsey's unavailable for week 1.
Yeah, which makes some sense. And I think it's the right way to go about it. At Mike Gill Show, I'll end it here with you, Mike. And that's DeVonta Smith. And DeVonta missed a little bit of time with a soft tissue injury, groin. Before the injury, he wasn't getting much traffic. After the injury, it seems like the Eagles have said, oh, we have DeVonta Smith. We got to get him involved as well. We talked about Dallas Goedert a little bit, Zach Pascal versus Quez Watkins. What kind of year are you expecting from DeVonta Smith? Year 2, really good player, but now he's not the guy. That's A.J. Brown. What kind of year are you expecting from DeVonta Smith?
I think we forget how solid of a year this kid had with no help around him last year.
Yeah.
I mean, he basically was the lone wolf out on that field on the outside, and I thought he handled himself pretty well, to the fact that, I do my show at Ocean Casino on Mondays, and halfway through the year, I went up and put a little wager on him to win the Rookie of the Year. Now, I didn't think it was going to happen, but the value was there. I thought maybe in the second half that he would have really taken off some, and that didn't really happen for him. But I don't see any reason why he shouldn't surpass the numbers he put up last year. And he had a pretty good year last year, and this has to do with, do they use him differently? Do they let him take more shots down the field? Is he going to get more one-on-one coverage that you will see him just out-talent the defensive back who is on him most weeks? So much like Goedert, I think he's a big factor in this offense. I don't know that he's going to have these eye-popping 1,500 yards, but I wouldn't be surprised if he approached 1,000, 1,200 yards.
All right, Mr. Value Betting, I've got one to finish off in that realm with you. Doing a show last night on WIP, somebody shot me a text of a photo of a guy who made a $20,000 bet on the Philadelphia Eagles to win the Super Bowl. And he got 25 to 1. I don't know if it was DraftKings or Stub. I don't remember.
We got 25 to 1 at Ocean on Monday.
Okay.
Not $25,000, by the way, did we put down? Just a little wager.
Okay. Bet Parks is the app that I have that I use that I recommend. Eagles are 30. Why wouldn't you go to a website that's going to give you 30 to 1 as compared to 25 to 1? If you're going to bet 20 grand, that's a whole nother question. But
Jody, come on. Ocean Casino Resort. Go to Ocean, no matter what.
When it floats back up to 30, I'll consider it. But right now at 25, sorry, Oceans. And they do. They move all the time and they change, and you just have to stay on top of this stuff. I said there are only 2 teams in the NFL right now that interest me as far as picking them to win it all and value of what their odds are at. One is the Philadelphia Eagles at 30-1, and the other is the Miami Dolphins at 40-1. You got a team right now you like at the number that they're at, Mike Gill?
Well, first off, so my partner on Mondays, Pete Thompson, he put $50 on the Eagles, and to which my producer said, "Why would you do that?" And I said, if you did the same bet in 2017, you probably would have got about similar odds, maybe probably a little bit better back in 2017. But hey, for $50, it was worth it, right? So that's not a terrible bet. So I agree, Jody, with you on that one. The team that I kind of like is the Raiders. I talked about this yesterday. The Raiders remind me a little bit of like the Eagles did this offseason. They were a playoff team last year that was surprising, and they went out and got the best receiver in football to add to their offense. Now, the one issue with them is they play in a much more difficult division than the Eagles do. Yeah. So getting wins, piling up a couple of wins here and there against teams in your division is probably going to be tougher for them. But if they can make the playoffs, they will be a battle-tested team. I love getting Carr and DeVonta together again. I like that matchup. They got the new coach down there. That's a team that I think you can get good value on, and wouldn't surprise me if they surprise people this year.
You like the new coach?
I mean,
I'm not a Josh McDaniel guy. That's why I'm with you on the evaluation of the talents the Raiders have. I don't like McDaniel a little bit. That's why I couldn't bet them to go to.
I don't love. I mean, I'm willing to say, all right, you had your first opportunity. It didn't go well. I'll give him credit for going back and going to the lab and trying to, I mean, it's been 10 years since he coached, right? Since he's been a head coach.
Well, yeah, it's been for good reason.
Coach of the Colts for 20 minutes before he said, "Oh, never mind, I'll go back to New England again."
He was almost the coach here, by the way. Almost.
Yeah. Well, listen, having Carr and Adams, and they've got some good, decent. They got good defensive pass rush as well. I think that's the elements for success is rushing the passer. They've got a number one. That's something they've lacked. I mean, they just haven't had that guy, that go-to guy at wide receiver. So I like the coach enough. How about that? I don't love it.
I give Jeffrey Lurie a ton of credit because Howie Roseman was recommending Josh McDaniels to be the head coach of this team. And Jeffrey Lurie kind of knew that, all right, these two can say whatever they want right now, but they're not going to get along long term. And he was just going to keep interviewing people till they found somebody better than Josh McDaniels in their mind. And that turned out to be Nick Sirianni. I don't think people know how close it was that Josh McDaniels was going to be the coach here. And by the way, Josh McDaniels was going to hire Jonathan Gannon to be his those two are very close to be his defensive coordinator. And that's where all that said that the Eagles were going to hire Jonathan Gannon no matter what, because they were going to bring in Josh McDaniels and he was going to be his defensive coordinator. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I'm quite happy that the Eagles didn't hire Josh McDaniels. Not a fan. Yeah. Wasn't a fan.
He was a disaster in Denver, and he knows it.
Coattails. The evidence is there. Rode Brady's coattails. All right, he won championships. Do you think it was because of Josh McDaniels and Tom Brady? Come on.
No, he was a disaster.
Denver, it basically blows up in his face. Yeah. Tim Tebow's going to carry him. Yeah, right. Nice call. He goes back to New England, wins with Brady again, gets back on his coattails again, takes the job in Indianapolis. They hire a bunch of coaches. 2 days later, he goes, no, never mind. Yeah. And he screws the Colts, goes back to New England, rides Brady's coattails again until Brady says, see you later, bye. And then the Patriot offense goes in the tank. Why? Because Tom Brady's not there. The genius Josh McDaniels couldn't pull them out of that tailspin. Yeah.
Well, by the way, though, I'm going to give Josh McDaniels is better than Matt Patricia.
Who is he better than? I don't know all that Patricia, without Tom Brady, who is he actually better than?
We'll see what that New England offense looks like this year.
Yeah, Matt Patricia or Joe Judge calling plays.
Oh,
I'd rather have Josh McDaniels.
Sorry, I see where you're going there. I'll give you. You know what? I don't know. maybe one of those two could be as good as Josh McDaniels. That tells you how little I think of Josh McDaniels. Mr. Gill, a pleasure, buddy. We're going to have you with us every single week. Very much looking forward to it. Thanks for jumping in midweek with us today.
Thanks,
all right,
Mike.
boys, we'll talk to you.
You can catch him every day, 2 to 6, down on 97.3 ESPN, the Sports Bash down the shore. McDonald and McMullen coming back. I got a couple more Eagles things to run by Johnny Mac, and then one of our very own contributors. He's writing now for JAKIB Sports.com, and you can catch him in other places as well. You know, you find him here with us on Birds 365. Eagle veteran scribe Paul Domowitch going to jump aboard here on Birds 365 in about 20, so stick around.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
The big story on that. Can you
search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today?
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that. Holy shit.
The glass is for cocktails, right?
It's for this, 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 and that.
Is the length of the glass equal to your...
You betcha.
But is it made out of...
Glass?
Okay, but is the rim...
Smooth?
Will you stop doing...
That?
I'm the professional here.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. All from the company that's highly awarded. 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and deliciously tasting vodka. So good, it just disappears.
He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. You got JM and JM, the Mac guys here on Birds 365. Paul Domowitch going to join us in about 15 minutes from now. John, I need your experience to give the Birds fans a little bit of a taste, because they're going to get pictures and some video from the team practices that the Eagles are going to go through, joint practices with the Browns the next couple of days. You were there last year for the Eagles team practices, first with the Patriots here in Philadelphia, and then up the Turnpike against the Jets this past year. Vary from practice to practice, vary from team to team. It's called a joint practice for a very specific reason. Both teams get to dictate some terms on how they use the time that they have when they're together on the field. What are the joint practices, not knowing what the Browns are actually looking to do, but just judging the Eagles and how they handled their business last year? What are these joint practices going to look like from a Philadelphia standpoint?
Yeah, it is kind of a joint negotiation. They always are. So basically you you get together and you say, what do you want to work on? What do we want to work on, and sort of mesh that together and try to fit both into the session. So if the Browns think they need work on third downs, for instance, and the Eagles say we want to work on red zone, whatever, could be red zone offense, red zone defense. You kind of cobble it out, make sure there's significant periods of both. And then they typically end with just team drills, usually hurry up, 2-minute situations where you get this really, really competitive environment. But it's always dependent on the coaches and, what they want to get accomplished and where they think they are with their particular teams. I remember, Bill Belichick has come in here for a number of times now. And everybody would worry like Bill's going to, railroad Chip Kelly or Nick Sirianni or whoever. But he doesn't. I mean, it truly is, both teams trying to get better. And they like it because the film isn't out there other than the team you're playing. The Eagles were because the Eagles are absurd with this stuff. I kind of talked about this yesterday on the show. They were even worried about the Jets a little bit because they played them later in the season. And it was like, by that point, everything's changed. In fact, the Eagles are a perfect example. They were a completely different team by that point of the season. It just doesn't, but there's so much concern of letting things out. And I laughed about that yesterday. I mean, as things have gotten simpler and simpler around the NFL, they seem to get more, clandestine, which is bizarre to me, but that's a little aside. But they work things out.
Now, what you were able to do with your phone last year, aka video camera, everybody on the planet has a video camera now, right there in their head. That is their phone.
And fans can take the video, but we can't.
Right, which I think is just stone cold ridiculous. How much of it does leak out? That it'll be Cleveland fans, so you're going to have to find Cleveland social media outlets where you can be able to check out some video. They will allow fans in Brea, Ohio there. So how much are we going to actually be able to learn from the film of the Eagles versus the Browns?
Not much.
Not
it's funny and completely, this wasn't the topic, but I was talking to Shane Steichen off to the side, and we were talking about the open practice at Lincoln Financial Field. And one of the other reporters mentioned something about, fans being able to film it. And Shane couldn't have cared less. I mean, he couldn't have cared less, like worrying about, I think the question was about like Dallas scouts or Giant scouts coming down the turnpike to look at the practice. And it's like, if they're going to do that, that stuff gets over. I think Bill Belichick is in people's heads so much because of his success. And obviously, you still hear it today. We hear it with Eagles. Hollis Thomas, who's been on the show, he can't get over it, man. He can't get over it. The Patriots cheated. So many of the Eagles back then, the Patriots cheated. If you can cheat and turn that into something tangible in the 40 seconds between plays, Godspeed, man. Godspeed. You're better than me. I tip my cap to you. I don't care about that stuff. I think most coaches don't care about that stuff, which is weird because they do care about, we might be putting a play installed that an opposition team that week has seen 100 times, but maybe they haven't run it recently and they don't want it reported because it might be a big moment, big spot in that game. They're more concerned with stuff like that than overreaching videos or stuff like or fan videos.
All right, Johnny Mac, there is one other position. We talked about the running backs earlier, and if I had my own little camera to be able to shoot and watch what happened in practice and put some evaluation into it, a position that I believe the Eagles are far from settled with going into their first game of the regular season against the Lions. And we talked about it, since last season ended, that's safety. You and I are both Epps guys, and we were early on during the offseason that the Eagles played him last year. And if you didn't read into it that the Eagles may have liked Marcus Epps more than some of the Eagle fans like Marcus Epps, that he was, in their eyes, their best safety. They certainly handled their business in bringing in other safeties, 2 guys, veterans, 1-year deal, basically the same exact deal. They weren't going to upgrade there. They thought that Epps was their best safety, and that's the way it's looked so far in the practices that you're at every single day. He turned up injured the other. Before we talk about the entire spot, Epps' injury, left the field, came back, but didn't practice again. Did you get any word as to what it was or how significant it was?
Back injury. And nothing as far how significant, just that he's out there watching. So again, not too concerned. If it were really serious, especially a back injury, they're not going to let him on the field, near the field, where somebody might run into him or something of that nature. So he's one of those guys already in that deference category. And you mentioned it, you saw it by playing time against the Jets. But I got to tell you, the bigger issue to me is when he was out yesterday, they don't know what to do with backup safety. They're giving first team reps to Josiah Scott, who was just a cornerback 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Remember, Reed Blankenship, an undrafted free agent, they gave $50,000 to come and sign, get first team reps. Finally, at the end of practice, they went back to Kayvon Wallace, who got benched essentially from the first team for Josiah Scott, who played cornerback 2 weeks ago, and an undrafted kid who had been playing ahead of him. And oh, by the way, Jaquiski Tartt hasn't taken a first team rep all summer. Now, he missed 3 days, 3 practices, 4 if you count the preseason game. You know, they have an issue at safety. If Marcus Epps can't play, if Anthony Harris can't play, then what do you do? And that's one of the reasons they traded for the kid from Seattle, Ugo Amadi. And thank God for our buddy Rob Amadi, because then I can remember Ugo Amadi. But yeah, they have an issue. And even Ugo's a safety, by training, by trade, so to speak, coming out of college at Oregon. But he's played mostly nickelback in Seattle, and he's more of a special teams guy, to be honest. So, boy, they got an issue there, Jody. And that's another position where you might say, come waiver wire time, maybe a trade. Maybe we start talking about Jalen Reagor for Chuck Clark again. Jalen Reagor and some kind of, you probably have to add something to it, obviously. But they could use some help at safety, to say the least.
InsideTheEagles.com is a website I go to every once in a while. Jeff Knox, leading writer, is a pretty good Eagle beat guy. He had Andre Sachire ranked as his number 3 safety on the Eagles as of right now, with Epps being 1 and last year's starter being 2. He had him ahead of Jaquiski Tartt, which I had no issues with whatsoever. Is Sachire? I think you've told us that it's more of a Josiah Scott thing, who just became a safety within the last couple of weeks. He's playing quarterback, and now he's not only jumped to safety, he's moved up the safety depth chart with the Eagles. Who would you rank one atop the other right now, Scott or Sachire at safety for the Birds?
Well, right now you have to have Scott ahead because he got first team reps and Sachire didn't. And he was one. I mentioned there were 3 guys who got first team reps. Andre was not one of them. Now, Andre got all the second team reps. So as they continued to rotate, I think it's one of those situations where Andre and has a lot of value, and so does Josiah, because they do three different things. They play safety, they play slot, and they play special teams.
Special teams.
So they're both in that same sort of category. I mentioned it, I think, on the show last week. It seems like the Eagles are trying to play up their versatility to get them on the 53. I think they're both going to be on the 53, barring, maybe if you trade for a Chuck Clark, maybe then you have to make a difficult decision and pick one or the other. But unless something changes, I think they're both going to be here. And then it would be interesting if you had to play them, what happens. I think the two most interesting names, though, are Kayvon Wallace and Jaquiski Tartt. As you mentioned, Tartt has not gotten one first-team rep. Wallace, if you remember way back at the beginning of camp, Anthony Harris was dealing with COVID, and Kayvon Wallace, the aftermath of COVID. Do we have our Jaquiski Tartt fan in there? Is that what you're smiling at?
I got to give him credit because he's sticking to it. We've mentioned this a couple times here on the show.
God bless.
We appreciate all our guys who stream. And yeah, I keep an eye on it. We don't reference it much because I talk too much. John talks too much. We don't have time to go to the stream. Yeah. But Dominique Dabney, I am 99% sure, was the individual who said when they signed Jaquiski Tartt, Eagles just added their best safety. So we're talking about the depth chart at safety. Dominique had Tartt at the top of the list. So as you and I sit here and kind of question aloud and wonder aloud how good the Eagles' depth is at the safety position, Dominique checked in and said, Tartt is just getting up to speed. I think the media is overstating our safety problem. Sorry, Dominique, we'll stand by our stance of, the Eagles have a safety issue. And I will certainly stand by my stance that Mr. Tartt is not the answer. And he sure as hell is not the Eagles' best safety, as you previously stated here on the screen.
Yeah, well,
if he does, I'll give you all the props in the world. I'll come on every day for a week and go, and we need to see what Dominique Dabney has to say because he knows the Eagles better than Jody McDonald. I'm not sweating that one much. Tartt was
one we can already put the dirt on, as they, so to speak, to say that he's the best safety. I mean, Marcus Epps and Anthony Harris have taken every single first team rep when healthy. So that tells you what the Eagles think their best safeties are. It's going to be Marcus Epps. It's going to be Anthony Harris, unless they bring in a Chuck Clark and maybe something changes from that perspective if they bring in somebody from outside the organization. Now, if you want to spin it like, okay, the Eagles know what he is. He's a veteran player. He's got to learn a new system, blah, blah, blah. And they want to look at the Josiah Scotts of the world and the Andre Sacherays and the Reed Blankenships and evaluate the younger players and then default and say, guess what? These guys can't do it. Default back to Jaquiski Tartt as a backup player. I'll leave the door slightly ajar for that. But no. Can we stop with that? This is the Eagles' best safety. I mean, come on. I mean, and if you're going to go down that route, if you're going to double down on that route, I want the stinking apology when Marcus Epps and Anthony Harris are out there week one.
Yeah, don't hold your breath on that one. Don't think it's coming, but I did have to note it today just because, again, and yeah, it's a shot at you and I because he had to go the media, which if you're watching Birds 365, I think we know who the media entail. That would be Mac.
The media.
Overstating
Speaking of part of the media.
Overstatement. Jaquiski Tartt is the Eagles' best safety. If there's an overstatement to be looked at here, it's the
there is a vast media conspiracy to downplay Jaquiski Tartt. Paul Domowitz is part of it too. He's going to join us next.
Shame on Damo. Yeah. He is in the green room. He is joining us next. We still got 40 solid minutes coming your way of this edition of Birds 365.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
The big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
7 on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit. Glasses for cocktails, right?
It's for this, this, and that.
Is the length of the glass equal to your...
You betcha.
But is it made out of...
Glass?
Yeah, okay, but is the rim...
Smooth?
Will you stop doing...
That?
I'm the professional here.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. All from the company that's highly awarded. 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and deliciously tasting vodka. So good, it just disappears.
You got the Mac guys, McMullen and McDonald here with you on Birds 365. We are joined by a longtime Eagles beat writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, doing it these days for the 3013.com and us on JAKIBSports.com. Paul Domowitz joins us here on Birds 365. JM, if you'd allow me, we'll talk all Eagles with Domo, but I do want to get one Hall of Fame question in first, because it's something I discussed on my shows on the weekend.
Is this Joe Klecko related?
No, it says got absolutely nothing to do with Joe Klecko. And don't even go there, McMullen, because what it does have to do with, I don't want Klecko's name tied to it in any way, shape, or form. Damo, I made a point on one of my shows about the fact that Fernando Tatis Jr. may have compromised his Hall of Fame chances at the age of 23 by testing positive for performance-enhancing drugs. And I got some calls and some tweets about the National Football League doesn't seem near as hung up about it, and they doesn't have as longer-lasting effect on the legacy of the career of a player in the National Football League, specifically Hall of Fame election. You guys at the NFL who have a vote, you're one of, how many is it? 60-something? 48 guys is all it is? Damn, that's specialized. You're in a very good position. You actually have meetings and talk about it. The last couple of years have been Zoom rather than in person, but at least those conversations are going down. In baseball, you just send in your ballot and it's done. You don't really decide it with anyone else. You decide it by yourself. Do you remember any conversations being had in any of those meetings once the list has been cut down and then you got to cut it even further to decide who's getting in? Somebody taking a stance of, well, no, I'm not going to put that guy in because he tested positive for PEDs. It's a cheater.
Yeah. You know what? Performance-enhancing drugs in football, I mean, anybody that played in the league before 2000 probably used them, and including everybody that's in the Hall of Fame. So we'd kind of be hypocritical. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not a big issue. Plus, we're not allowed to consider off the field stuff anyway. But
but PEDs is on the field.
No, it's considered since the punishment is coming off the field. I mean, there have been players suspended that I can speak personally would never affect how I would vote for them if I considered them Hall of Fame worthy. Just because, I mean, I understand it's more directly cheating in baseball. I mean, because it's such a stat-oriented game, and you can see the direct result. I mean, like I said, it was just so prevalent in football for so long that it's never been an issue with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I wish more baseball writers were like that, Damo, because I mean, if I don't know who did what. I mean, there are certain guys, but I always go back to the Mitchell report, and the vast majority, you can go through that report, people can read it still today. The vast majority of players named in that report were, mediocre to less than mediocre. There's no guarantee that doing PED, it might help you get to the major leagues. It might help you get, how many pitchers were on the gas that maybe struck Barry Bonds out? Well, he never struck out, but you get the point. Got him out because they were on it. I don't know. There's no way I can know that. So all I can judge on is what I saw. And, when you're keeping out some of the best players from a museum, essentially, that tells the story of the game, to me, all you got to do is put a plaque up and say, all right, this was the steroid era, but these were the best players of the steroid era. That's it. Yeah. And that, to me, is the simplest fix, but we've gone off on a tangent. Got to get back.
I wanted, because Adamo is one of only 48 people who can directly speak to it. I wanted to hear from a guy who's in on those meetings.
I know. And I go,
the only player, guys, who's off the field behavior came up in all the years I've been doing it, and I really had a problem with that was when Terrell Owens was his first year of eligibility. Out of nowhere, the Hall of Fame told us that we could consider players that were a negative influence in the locker room, and a lot of guys, I mean, I saw him at his worst, but a lot of guys jumped on that. And that's the reason it took Owens 3 years to get into the Hall of Fame, because a lot of guys held that against him.
Did they ever do a recall with a vote with OJ? Did they do anything of that nature?
No.
Yeah.
Again,
I don't think they should have.
You're in.
Yeah, you should. I mean, it's not a Hall of Fame for best husbands. But all right. Now I've gone way down a route. But since we're talking about senior committee, that's today, right, Dama? Senior committee. So Joe Klecko might get in the Hall of Fame today.
Good chance.
Crossing, I think they're down to 12, and they'll pick 3. They can pick as many as 3, or is it 3? Do they have to pick 3? As many as 3.
They'll give us 3, and it doesn't necessarily mean 3 will get in. It probably will, but
isn't that pretty much a rubber stamp now that they've changed this? The guys get in if they're recommended.
I mean, we have such great respect for the people on those committees that it would have to be somebody that was really questionable, or that we felt that they overlooked,
like Joe Klecko. No, I'm just poking fun at Jody. Joe's a very good player. Very good player.
Hall of Famer. Even if he doesn't get in, he'll be a Hall of Famer in my eyes. All right, back to the Birds, Damo. You're not heading out. Johnny Mac's not heading out to Cleveland, but damn, the Eagles take this joint practice thing very seriously. They showed after last year where they went undefeated, kind of like the perfect game that Jalen Hurts had here this past week. It's fleeting, but you live in the moment and you make it everything it's worth. Sirianni this week seemed to be almost energized by the fact that they're getting into these practices. Why do you think it worked as well for the Eagles last year? Nick Sirianni's first year as a coach, can he possibly do what he did last year with the 4 practices he's going to have with the Browns and the Dolphins?
Yeah, I mean, they got to hit somebody sometime, right? I mean, the whole approach of not much contact in practices, keeps you healthy. But at some point here, you've got to go out there and the fact that you're playing different teams is just a refreshing thing for these guys who have been going up against their own teammates for 2 weeks or whatever it's been. So, the question is, after these joint practices the next 2 weeks, going to be any injuries? We'll see. There's no tackling to the ground and stuff, but so far they've been one of the healthiest teams as far as avoiding serious injury through training camp so far. But we're not to the starting line yet.
I guess the most difficult injury to date would be Jason Kelsey, but that was more of a sort of a that's been going on for years before he finally, and the Eagles expect him back for week 1. So
exactly.
It's worked so far. We'll see if it continues to work. Your latest on JAKIBsports.com, you took a look at Shane Steichen yesterday. Jalen Hurts in the deep ball. And you got the numbers. Jalen wasn't bad with the deep ball last year. I think that's a false narrative at times. And during practice, he's really got a feel for that deep ball down the right sideline specifically. When the ball comes out on time, he's got a pretty nice feel for it, and we've seen it a couple times with long touchdowns to A.J. Brown. Can he be consistent enough? And do you think that part of it is accuracy or more just being on time?
I think, judging from what we saw last year, John, I think more of it is being on time. I thought he was, he took a lot. There have been a lot of criticism of him suggesting he doesn't have a strong enough arm. I've never felt that was the case. Didn't feel it was the case in college. It's not a rifle, but it's certainly adequate enough. His problem with some of his deep passes last year was he was late throwing them. People had to wait for them. He threw 5 interceptions last year on deep balls because of that, because the defender was able to recover. So he just the timing needs to be better. With this receiving core, and A.J. Brown's not a deep threat per se. He's more of a yards after the catch guy, I think. But with him and DeVonta, it's going to open things up all over for Quez Watkins. It's going to open up things, I think, for the running backs on wheel routes. I just think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for them to throw the deep ball in between a lot of the other stuff they're going to do with these receivers. So, I think he's going to improve this year. Only time will tell, but I'm sure he's worked on it hard in the off season, including when he was out on the West Coast early. So practice makes perfect, as they say.
Speaking of those wheel routes or any other toss to the back that you want to throw into the mix, sure enough, Miles Sanders got 2 tosses his way in that first Eagle drive, and then they kind of shut it down for Miles. And Kenny Gainwell has not had a bust-out Buffalo camp, despite in some corners, high expectations for this upcoming season. Does that open it up for your guy, Mr. Oklahoma, Kennedy Brooks? Is he going to make this team? Can he catch the ball out of the backfield? Somebody's got to do it for the Eagles.
Well, I think he had 1 catch Friday night, if I'm correct.
Did he have 1?
Yeah, he's not a big catch guy. He's if he's going to make this team, it's going to be because he can get some hard yards and short yardage situations. He's not a fast guy. He's just big and he's strong, and we'll see. It's he's apparently not knocking anybody's socks off yet. So, but with that 16-man practice squad, they're going to keep a lot of people that might surface at some point during the season.
If you're going to catch a 2-yard pass, it might as well be for a touchdown, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Hey, it's very effective. It's Jalen Hurts, right? Perfect passer rating. Look at those numbers. Not a statistical game, as Dama was talking about, versus baseball. But it's important. I think people get too bogged down in it at times. With this offense as a whole, Damo, though, we do look at, and I think Howie's done a good job of giving Jalen Hurts weapons. So, and I think A.J. Brown is sort of the domino piece. He's like Jordan Davis is to the defense. I think everything falls into place. Instead of a number 1, DeVonta Smith is a number 2. Quez Watkins is a number 2. I'd probably have an issue with that, but as a number 3, I think, yeah, that's not bad. And if he doesn't perform, you have Zach Pascal's, who has shown to be what Nick Sirianni thinks he is, very reliable, very smart, tends to run the right routes, being where he's supposed to be. Then you have Dallas Goedert, obviously one of the best tight ends in football. Miles, Kenny Gainwell, even though Kenny's had a couple drops. How do you keep all these guys happy? Or is it just a matter of winning football games keeps you happy?
Yeah, and that's obviously a question. I think Jalen's leadership skills will come in handy there, because I don't think these guys are going to be getting in his face and telling him, you're not throwing me the ball enough. I mean, he's pretty close with both Smith and AJ Brown. One of the things I liked about that first drive, I mean, there's nothing not to like. It was perfect pretty much from his standpoint. You mentioned Miles Sanders earlier, Jody. I mean, the check down, that's something we didn't see a lot of from him last year. He wasn't willing to take that. I think they've drilled that into him, that if it's there, you take it. Because, I mean, A, it helps your completion percentage. B, it keeps the ball moving. C, these guys can run with the ball after they catch it. So
maybe not Jack Stoll, but I like the fact that he threw the ball to Jack Stoll over the middle.
Yeah. This is, I mean, you go back to Andy. This has always been their big emphasis, spread the ball around. And I think that's what we're going to see this year, because you've got so many of these guys. I don't think we're going to see AJ or DeVonta catch 100 balls. But I think, if this team wins, they'll be tickled pink.
I bemoaned the fact earlier, Damo, that yesterday on ESPN, they had, I think it was 42 consecutive hours of fantasy football, which just every time you do is fantasy. And I'm playing no fantasy. I played a lot in my life, but I'm not playing any this year.
42 consecutive seconds is too much.
Wow. They just kept pounding it down your throat. But for you Eagle fans out there, we're going to have your draft this week, and you have to always have the balance of wanting to draft players you want to root for and wanting to draft players that you really think are going to put up good numbers so you can win your league. I think you can serve both masters with Dallas Goedert this year. No sharing the limelight with Ertz at the start of the season. It seems to be Jalen wants to throw him the football. I think he's got a chance to be a top 5 and maybe even top 3 number getting tight end in the NFL this year. Am I too optimistic in Goddard's production?
No, I don't think so. I think he's on the verge of making that next big step into into that group with Kelsey and Kittles. And, I mean, what's going to be interesting with him is, one of the areas that Jalen did not perform particularly well last year was in the red zone. Didn't really have a favorite red zone target like Wentz had with Zach Ertz when he was playing well in the red zone. And I think Goddard's got the potential to be that guy, which means a lot, for fantasy guys. That means a lot of touchdown catches. He's a guy you can throw the ball to on the 5 and he'll get in because of the yards after the catch ability. I think Dallas Goedert's going to, I think he's going to have a potentially all-pro type of season this year if he stays healthy.
Let's flip the script and go to the defensive side, Damo. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about the Eagles changing their defensive philosophy when it's really just one player making, I kind of mentioned with AJ Brown on defense, it's Jordan Davis, sort of the domino where all the pieces now fall into place. They basically ran odd man fronts last year on running downs, and then even when they're rushing the passer, 4 men. It's not changing. It's just that guys aren't playing out of position because you got the big guy in the middle who can take up multiple blockers. But you noted before on JAKIB Sports, he can do more than that, or at least theoretically, because of his athleticism, which is just ridiculous for his size. We've never seen a guy like this in the history of the NFL. Is that going too far?
No, I mean, he's an athletic freak. I mean, 6'6.5", 340 on a good day. That has can run a 10-yard split in 1.63, which is, I mean, that's Myles Garrett speed. I did a story the other day talking to a sports science guy on Jordan. And I mean, he said, you put him out on the edge where he's getting a running start. You're talking 2,000 pounds of momentum coming, when you multiply speed times. There's nobody in the league, probably nobody ever been in the league that can match that. And you think of a guy standing in front of him trying to block him. Now, the criticism has been that, well, he would have to play outside. He would have to develop a bunch of other moves. I'm not so sure. I mean, I think a bull rush might just be enough if you're coming that fast at somebody. It'll be interesting. I mean, that's why I think, Gannon's just got a lot of, I mean, I haven't been to practices. You have been, John. He's had Fletcher Cox outside on occasion in practice. I mean, he's got so many movable parts that's going to be part of the intrigue of this front this year. That, I mean, not the 3 or the man front or the 4-man front, because teams are in 4-man fronts, in sub packages 80% of the time now. So, but it's just a matter of where they're lining up. I mean, he can do so much with this group because of the versatility, not just of Davis, but of all the rest of those guys, that I can't wait to see them in action.
Damo, last question. We talk a lot about Jalen Hurts and the leadership quality that he shows, and that the guys follow him and take his lead on the offense. I had a question on the Eagle defense coming into the year, with the fact that I thought the leader was Brandon Graham, that he was the guy in best position to charge it. I'm not talking about getting the plays in your helmet, but the guy who really draws the defense together. But I didn't know if he was going to be able to do it, because you didn't know what he was going to come back at. Everybody who's reported from practice and even flashed a little bit in the exhibition game, it looks like BG's as good, as quick, as motivated, as at the top of his game as he has been the last couple of years. How big is that to the Eagle defense this year?
Well, that's huge, Jody. Just, my concern is that he's 35, and you just, I mean, as healthy as he looks and as good as he looks right now, you just don't know if he's going to break down at some point. The odds are against him staying healthy for 16 games, which is why I'm sure Jonathan Gannon and his defensive staff are going to monitor BG's snaps and try not to overdo it with him, pick their spots. You mentioned leadership. I'll tell you, maybe not this year because he's a rookie, but the guy on that defense who's going to end up being the leader.
Oh, Nakobe.
When I talk to scouts and personnel people before the draft, I mean, they just raved about Nakobe Dean's leadership ability, his intelligence. I mean, they said he can be president if he wants to one day. I mean, that's how
he's got to be a reality TV star first. He's got to get on Hard Knocks first.
Or run for senator in Georgia, maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
There you go. Damo, great stuff. We always appreciate when you come on. Looking forward to you're being a regular contributor over the year. We love your stuff on JAKIBsports.com. Thanks for jumping aboard with us today.
Thanks for having me, guys, and congratulations on 35 years.
I had 35 years.
I had the over on that.
Did you?
Yeah.
I know a whole bunch of people who had the under, so I'm glad somebody cashed. Damo, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Great. That's Paul Donwich. He writes for us at JAKIBsports.com, 33rd team, Hall of Fame voter who, I got off. Sorry, I apologize for getting off on the Hall of Fame tangent.
I meant to get to Joe Klecko. I meant to poke you. I got another friend who's so obsessed with Joe Klecko getting in. I hope he gets in today.
I'm a Klecko guy. The three guys who have been banging the drum: Jody McDonald, Ray Didinger, Paul Donwich. Don't know if it's going to get done or not, but we have tried over the last however many years. All right, usually I have to do a quick exit stage left. My buddy, John McMullen, will come back with my other pal, Tone. Tone will be the guy who takes you to the finish line and puts a bow on the show. Keep it here on Birds 365.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
The big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit. Glass is for cocktails, right?
It's for this, this, and that.
Is the length of the glass equal to your...
You betcha.
But is it made out of...
Glass?
Okay, but is the rip...
Smooth?
Will you stop doing...
That?
I'm the professional here.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. All from the company that's highly awarded. 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and deliciously tasting vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Welcome back to Birds 365. I'm your humble host, Tone DeShields II, and I'm joined by John McMullen, and I am filling in for Jody Mac. As he mentioned to you guys, I'm going to be closing up the show with you guys for the next couple days, and of course, I'm always grateful for the opportunity, and I'm always grateful to kick it with my man, JM. How you feeling, man?
Good, man. Good to see you. I already saw you, but
hey, listen, I can never see you too much, JM, never too much, but I have to ask you something. You brought up a topic that was pretty interesting to me, and I don't know if you guys really touched on it as much as you possibly could, but I want to pick your brain about it more. Marcus Epps, he did miss practice, I believe, yesterday, and you said something that intrigued me. The fact that if he's not there, you already saw how bad that defense can look. Can you expand on that and, really just touch on the value of Marcus Epps right now, even though he is a young player still trying to prove himself, but clearly he already has a value on this team.
Yeah, he does. I mean, he is, as I mentioned, quickly to join the camp of the deference players, I like to call them. Those are the players that the Eagles want to keep healthy as much as possible, which is pretty amazing considering, where he's come from. I don't want to sit here and overstate it and say Marcus Epps is a great player. He's still got a lot to prove. He's never been an NFL starter before. There's a lot of projection when it comes to Marcus Epps versus, a proven ability to do things. But he's very important for this team right now. And you kind of saw it when he was out yesterday. And to a certain degree, Anthony Harris, who's a more proven player, is in the same category as well because he's missed camp at times with bouncing back from COVID. Also had a quick dental issue where he's forced to miss a practice. And then you kind of see the Eagles sort of scrambling to find somebody else to take those first-team reps. It started out with Kayvon Wallace. They didn't like what they saw there, obviously. They've since gone to Josiah Scott, who, as I said, was a cornerback 2 weeks ago. He was a slot corner. And then they started moving him back to safety to take a look at him there. Andre Sachary at times, now Reed Blankenship, who's an undrafted free agent. All these players have gotten first-team reps. Yesterday, it was 3 different players. Josiah Scott first, then Reed Blankenship, then Kayvon Wallace. It's not a good sign. That, to me, says the Eagles are rotating these players through, hoping somebody sort of grabs the brass ring, so to speak. And Jaquiski Tartt, we joked about it earlier. There's some listeners, because of his history and because they know the name, he has not taken one first-team rep all summer. He's been on the second and often the third team, and he missed some practices because of a personal issue. That didn't help him. Right now, he's closer to not making this team than to making the team. And this is going to be a position where the Eagles might look to do something. They already brought in Ugo Amadi, but as I said, Ugo, even though he's drafted as a safety in Seattle, played mostly slot corner. He's a good special teams player. I think the Eagles brought him in more for that reason, special teams, than anything else. They could still look at again at safety. And we'll see as we get closer to the 53-man cutdown. But it's an issue. It's an issue, and you can see it when Epps and or Harris aren't there.
Well, I mean, yeah, when you bring up Jaquiski Tartt, right? I mean, clearly he's living up to that NFL acronym, not for long, right? You're only as good as your last Sunday of football. And, when it comes to, this team from the safety position as well, they're clearly throwing things at a wall, praying that it sticks. And it's not a good position to be in, because it's not like they don't have the bodies. It's the fact that they don't know if anyone can actually measure up to the standard. And one of the bigger disappointments has been Kayvon Wallace, a guy that was drafted, I believe, in the 3rd or 4th round, something like that. And he had a really productive career at Clemson. He was team captain all 4 years. He was more so that in the box style of safety, that Malcolm Jenkins, that Brian Dawkins style. Not saying he's those guys, but just that style of playing in the box, being very physical.
Please don't compare those.
Yeah, I know, right? You have to make sure you preface everything you say when it comes to Kayvon Wallace. But yeah, he's someone who's been a disappointment. And then the fact that they brought in Josiah Scott to be that hybrid guy, they tried him out of that position, just speaks to the lack of trust in this depth. But speaking of depth, the running back room, especially, I'm getting nervous. Miles Sanders, his health is already starting to become a question. Kenny Gainwell, is he capable of taking that next step? What are the limitations on his game? Boston Scott, we know what he can provide, but they're missing that physicality in that running back room. They're missing someone who can get that short yardage, and you saw that take shape in that preseason game against the Jets. They had no one that can really get the short yardage.
Yeah, I mean, there are 3 positions. We just mentioned safety, running back, tight end as well, where you could still see some stuff happening. There could still be people from outside the organization coming in here as we get closer to the cutdown day and week 1 in Detroit. I find it very hard to believe that the Eagles are only going to keep 3 running backs on the final roster. I don't think Jason Huntley did anything to stand out against the Jets. He's a good kick returner, but I don't know if you can keep a guy just to be a kick returner. In fact, I know you can't, especially when you have to carry Jalen Reagor. So there's a lot of dominoes that have to fall. Kennedy Brooks probably not ready, going to be on the practice squad. They can find a running back, I think, on the waiver wire, and I think that may be the route they go. But I'm not as concerned with Miles Sanders as most people. I think they're just being cautious from the injury perspective. Now, look, that's his history over the past couple of years. He's going to miss a few games. It'd be nice to count on him for 17 games. I'm more concerned about Kenny Gainwell because I don't think Kenny's had a good camp. I think when Miles has been out there, Miles has had, a good camp. He's in shape. He's clearly got a chip on his shoulder, wants to prove something, and I think he will prove something. Kenny Gainwell, I think there was a big hope that he would take a pretty big leap forward in that year 1 to year 2 thought process. It's only practice, but I haven't seen it in practice yet. Maybe he's a game player. Maybe he's maybe he shows up on Sundays, but it's a concern.
So what do you think the disconnect is for Kenny Gainwell? I mean, he's a guy in a very good situation, an offense that's friendly to his game. I'm trying to understand what do you believe the disconnect is in his development?
Maybe the expectations. I mean, he was a 5th round pick. I think I talk about it this year with Nakobe Dean because he was projected as higher. I think there's some people that almost expect him to be better. He took a year off, remember, with COVID, his final season in Memphis. They put a lot on his plate. I mean, 3rd down back, I get it. Hurry up back, I get it. But short yardage back for Kenny Gainwell, I don't get that. The biggest concern he dropped another pass yesterday, and that's supposed to be what he's good at. I've heard a lot of people say Austin Eckler, he could be that type of back, maybe not a feature back like, Jonathan Taylor or Nick Chubb or, Dalvin Cook, maybe not that kind of feature back, but a pretty good Austin Eckler type back. I don't know. To me, and when all that kerfuffle started with Miles Sanders and everybody he took second team reps, which he did, but that was just a rotation thing. And they're saying, well, maybe he's losing ground. He ain't losing ground. He's gaining ground. He's more important to this team. He's clearly the best running back on this team.
I guess for me, right, I'm trying to understand. I know Kenny Gainwell, he's a pass catching guy. That's been his calling card. But I feel like people are underestimating Boston Scott's ability to be valuable in the passing game. I mean, we've seen Boston Scott execute screenplays in Doug Peterson's offense. We've seen him, catch passes for touchdowns, take it to the house. We've seen Boston Scott just be a reliable source of offense. Are there any signs that this offense or Nick Sirianni or Shane Steichen may think about using Boston Scott more in the passing game, I guess, to supplement their weaknesses?
Not right now. I think, Boston is that role. I called him a utility player early in the show. That's what he is. And he always performs. And maybe at some point they'll start to realize maybe he can be more than a utility player. He certainly can be against the Giants. If he gets another opportunity, maybe he can build on it. But right now they consider him that utility player. When they need him, he's going to be there and he's going to perform. And maybe he is. Maybe he's the kind of guy who can perform in short bursts. But the more he plays, he gets exposed. There's some issues with his size, more his height, obviously. That limits him a little bit. And I think that's the way the Eagles look at it. But he's a good backup running back.
Yeah, I guess when all else fails, right, break glass and Jordan Howard will come to the rescue.
Yeah. I wouldn't count on that this time. I think they want to move on. You're right. He's a good fit for this offense, but he's never healthy, and they want somebody who can be healthy, and they can probably find. They should be able to find that on the waiver wire, and especially behind this offensive line.
And on that note, you guys, we're going to begin to close out the show. Make sure you guys continue to support JAKIB Sports by smashing that like button on the content. Make sure you guys continue to comment below and stay engaged in the live chat. We appreciate all the support you guys provide. And most importantly, make sure you guys are subscribed to the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel and turn on that notification bell. Remember, it keeps you privy to whenever we drop content so you don't miss a beat. And on top of that, you guys, make sure you check out more from John McMullen, Paul Domowich, and Joe Santiliquido on JAKIBsports.com. That's JAKIB Sports.com. And make sure you guys stay on the lookout for the best post-game show that's coming soon to a television, to a stream near you. It's going to be broadcasted on our JAKIB Sports YouTube channel and 6ABC. The JAKIB Sports post-game show is going to have Seth Joyner, Mike Missinelli, Devin Caney, Derek Gunn. We got some heavy hitters on there for you guys, so do not miss it. We're going to be live every single Eagles game day, a few minutes after the show, broadcasting live from Ocean Casino and Resort, where you can get all your sports betting done at the gallery. But without further ado, he's John McMullen. I'm Tone DeShields II. You guys were locked in on Birds 365. Take care, you guys. One love. Stay humble. Stay healthy. And most importantly, stay hungry. And we'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.